growing sport integrity challenges and their impact on sports betting regulation.
Hello again, and good afternoon, everyone. If you were here for the previous masterclass, this is going, and if you found that interesting, I assure you that you will find this interesting as well, because I think it's a very healthy continuation of what we've seen in the previous session. The previous session was more data-oriented, boots on the ground. This will be the same, because I thank Sarah for staying on for this panel. So we're still going to get the intelligence component into the conversation. But we do have a regulator here with us. We do have Dieter from the IOC, who will give us some also policy insights into collaboration, etc. So yeah, I promise that this will be another interesting session. But before I start, I want to thank the International Association of Gaming Advisors, who are actually the ones hosting this panel. And I thank Kirsty, the director, who's here with us today. And thank you for trusting me in chairing this session as well. We have a list of questions to go through. Yeah, no pun intended, but my bet is we won't be able to go through them all, but we'll try. But before that, yeah, the sports betting industry is continuously growing. And obviously, the more the industry grows, the more pressure there is to safeguard the integrity, not just of the sports betting markets, but also of sports in general. And what we're going to try and explore in this session, like I said, is how regulators are fighting are fighting the fight as well. Before the session, we saw the sports betting operators component and the sports, but we're going to bring the regulatory perspective. We're going to look into the element of collaboration. Like we've said in the previous session, it is such a fundamental notion when it comes to sports betting integrity. So we're going to see how the likes of the IOC collaborate with different partners, etc. So yeah, I'm pretty much delighted to have this group of panelists with us. We have Dieter from the International Olympic Committee. Dieter and myself have known each other for quite some time now. Dieter is also ex-Interpol, and I was previously with a regulator, so the relationship changed, but the topic is still very much the same, and our efforts are still very much the same. Sarah, thank you so much for staying on for this panel as well. Like Trudy said, it's a long one for us, but yeah, generally the people in the sports integrity ecosystem love talking about this topic, and hopefully this shows some of that commitment. And Marta, who is actually an ex-colleague, I had a very short time working with Marta, but in that short time, I had already seen her efforts and commitment, and I was very much pleased to see the sports betting integrity team fall under her remit. So thanks a lot, Marta, for being here today. My first question is for you, Dieter. Obviously, the IOC is different from a traditional sports organization, because the IOC does not oversee a single discipline, not a single sport, but multiple sports. And when that remit, I wanted to ask you, so how does your team at the IOC prioritize and manage intelligence across such diverse betting and competition environments? Obviously, in the previous session, we saw tennis specifically. With the IOC, it's much more than that. It's different disciplines. How is that handled?
Yeah, so thank you, Antonio. Thank you for having the IOC and me also on this panel here today. It's, again, a good opportunity to reach out to operators, regulators, who obviously hold a lot of very useful information, as we also have seen from the masterclass. And yes, I mean, you use the word the IOC oversees the sports. I have to be careful. We're also streamed not to get into any sports diplomatic issues, so we don't really oversee all of the sports. That we recognize the sports. We work with them towards implementing the charter, the development of the sports, the values it comes with, the entertainment it provides, etc. So in this regard, ITIA, tennis, but all the other sports, we recognize they have the full autonomy to govern their sports and to work also towards protecting the integrity. But what we do specifically is, even though we're at the IOC, we're called the Olympic Movement Unit, which means we try to support all our international federations in protecting their integrity. And this means that we try to be, as this unit, kind of an interface, a go-between, let's say, the sports betting ecosystem, in which you guys play a role at IBIA, MGA, individual operators, other regulators we have relationships with, and then all our international federations and our national Olympic committees. Of course, organizations such as ITIA and notably also football, they have strong integrity frameworks themselves. So they don't need to rely on us to reach out and get information from the betting industry. But for other sports, including also on your statistics, you mentioned basketball, but also table tennis, handball, volleyball, badminton. Those are some of the smaller sports that we try to support and try, so it's basically they can come through us to reach out to betting operators to get the useful information. So a lot of my job is to develop working relationships, but also sign specific data sharing agreements, regulators, industry associations, operators, and then to get that information to the relevant sport. So we believe it's not, a lot of federations have limited means also to dedicate at least one person to develop all those industry relations. So it's kind of a service, maybe a service is not a good word, but we try to reach out on behalf of the federations, and then if they require our further support, we also try to do that within the investigation, which then of course is sitting most of the time with that jurisdiction. So it means our platform, which we call EBIS, through that we can reach out to over 130 betting entities, and it basically runs 24/7, so we receive alerts and try to follow up with them with the relevant sports federation. So this is how we really sit in between two. And then what we also do continuously is making risk assessments. I'm also here in Italy because Milano Cortina is coming up. Yep. So we're working with the betting industry to say, look, how is the betting going to be on Milano Cortina? Which sports are going to stand out? What will be the risk level? Which we then again feed back to the sports concerned, and then develop a good approach to basically protect the Winter Olympic Games as well.
Yeah, and thank you, Dieter, for actually covering sort of also the efforts that you guys need to go through before before the Olympic Games. That the integrity part doesn't start at the start of the Olympic Games, but you guys actually do a lot of work.
Yes, and maybe just on that point. So we work 24/7 in monitoring and being that interface, but the games are on either the winter or the summer games are on only every 4 years. Yeah. It's quite a specific event, which is what we see now always offered for betting, but maybe not in the highest of volumes. But we need to do this exercise regularly to see also where the offer is going and where potential risks may go. And of course, it's not only about manipulation, but it's also about athlete betting within their sport. Yeah. Or in case of the Olympics, if you're a participant in the Olympics, or a coach or a physio, you're not allowed to bet on anything within those Olympics. So this is what we also see. Athletes, they know that if you're a football player, you cannot bet on football. They know that. But when they go into a multi-sport event, and they're, let's say, part of the Maltese delegation or the UK or the Belgian delegation, there's nothing on the Olympics they're allowed to bet on because they have, of course, privileged information. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Dieter. Now I'm moving to Sarah. And Sarah, we've already covered a lot of ground in the previous masterclass when it comes to to tennis. But like I said in my intro, I still wanted to get a mix of sort of the intelligence aspect in this conversation. And as we've seen in the previous presentation, tennis is indeed still continuing to see, despite the decrease, there's still quite a high number of alerts being received. So on that note, I wanted to ask you what patterns or typologies are emerging from your investigations in recent years?
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation again. We're delighted to be here and to represent the ITIA.
Thank you.
What we are seeing is organised groups behind the recruitment of players. That can happen in different ways. That could be in person or it can be via social media. But what we're noting is maybe one player is approached in the first instance, and then that one player will then reach out to other players, either on the tour that they are on, and we're seeing that mostly, again, on the World Tennis Tour, but they will reach out to friends, other players. It could be just by language. So, for example, if a player is in one country, not at home, but there are other players that speak in the same language, they may feel able to approach that player. And not because they've been involved in anything before, it's just some commonality. And then from that, they're gaining the confidence to say, are you willing to get involved? Now, it's never as direct as that. It could be I know someone who could help you, because there is a lot of vulnerability in relation to low income at the lower levels of tennis that I mentioned earlier. So there is a huge vulnerability there. Now, what we're also seeing with the organised groups is that they're having pods of players. So they may be reaching out to different players who may not even know of each other's existence, but they're creating what we describe as a pod of players. So that is of interest to us. And then what we're seeing, those players are being paid handsomely to be corrupting their matches. Yep. And it's not the whole match. Again, we're seeing the same patterns as we saw earlier in the masterclass. It is to lose a couple of games, potentially, or a fixed set. Now, by doing that, the bettors, the corruptors, want the player to do well in that tournament, because every stage of that tournament, there is an opportunity to bet. But also what they really are wanting is those players to maybe go from the World Tennis Tour, if we're talking about the men's tour, they would want them to go up to the Challenger. And again, more money, a significant increase in payments to if you could find someone that was on the Challenger Tour. And that, again, is another vulnerability for players. So that's our biggest thing. And as I mentioned earlier, it continues where other players are corrupting other players. So it's not the stranger always, that may be the first instance, but other players corrupting other players, which for me as an investigator is very sad.
Yeah. That's very interesting. I sort of take two key points from that. The fact that, ironically speaking, there is a sense of collaboration which is required from the match fixer's part. And I guess maybe that is why one of the reasons why collaboration is so important on the enforcement and monitoring aspect. But I guess, Sarah, from that point, I also take the fact that sometimes for match fixers, it is not the match fixing event that is important for them, but sometimes it is the actual spot fixing which happens in the particular event. Because like you said, sometimes they actually want the player to go beyond their current tour, etc., which I find quite insightful. I move now to Marta from the MJ, and the MJ is one of those regulators, Marta, who have long been investing resources in sports betting integrity. I'm pleased to have been there at the time when the MGA created its sports betting integrity unit. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think that was 2019. But I'm also aware that even before that time, the MGA had a single point of contact. I remember at the time, even 2019, when the team was created, we already had agreements with the IOC, with the ITIA, back then the Tennis Integrity Unit, the TIU. So so yeah, the MGA is clearly one of those regulators who has been long pushing resources to protect the integrity of sport. So on that note, I want to ask you, Marta, so how has the authority evolved its betting integrity frameworks through time in response to new market risks, especially?
Definitely, I believe we're lucky that of the foresight of my predecessors that we have definitely built and invested resources in both human capacity, so having the right resources at the MGA to be able to actually investigate related sports betting and integrity issues, but also the mechanisms, the technology, building the rapport, building the memorandum of understanding with relevant enforcement agencies, data sharing agreements with sports governing bodies. So there was a lot that was done. So we'll definitely won't be reinventing the wheel, but just enhancing, as you mentioned, depending on the risks that we're seeing. And so the sports betting integrity team at the moment falls within a larger regulatory oversight team, right? And our responsibilities look at our operators actually complying with their obligations. But as we know, this topic goes beyond that. The sports betting reporting mechanism is one of the tools that help us investigate matters that go beyond general compliance obligations. But if I had to speak a little bit about both angles, from a regulatory oversight perspective, what we have done, focusing on sports betting integrity, is actually looking at enhancing our supervisory approach, ensuring that we focus our resources on where the risks lie. So as an authority, we sit on a lot of data and evidence on what our operators see, what our operators are doing, how compliant they are. And that helps us, obviously, identify the risk areas that we can focus on when we go and actually meet with our operators, conduct our supervisory engagements. So we would be in a position to actually understand the risks that we are monitoring. So moving more from a process, compliance-driven approach towards more of an evidence-led approach. And this leads me to, okay, so how does this tie with sports betting integrity really? So this year, two main priorities that came about was, one, ensuring that our operators are actually reporting. And if they're not, why aren't they really and truly? Is it because they don't know how to actually use our sports betting reporting mechanism? Or is it because they don't know about their obligations? Is it something that we can improve or educate and guide? Or is it something that perhaps maybe we have larger troubles with certain non-reporting entities, mostly relating to governance? So usually a compliance failure on one side would trickle down in a larger compliance failure. And then from a risk-based approach, we also look at risk beyond our regulatory oversight. So for example, this year we focused on local football betting, for example. We just released the outcome of a thematic review that focused on local football betting. It was a risk area that was identified locally when we were in discussions with our local FIAU, so the Financial Intelligence Analysis Unit, and the police force. And we decided together that it would be an opportune time to actually conduct a review of local football betting to understand whether there is an actual risk to the level that we thought there would be. The result was that there are safeguards in place, that local football betting is moderate in size, and perhaps the risk is not as big as we thought it was. But if we hadn't done such a review, we wouldn't really actually know. So these type of supervisory engagements actually help us understand more the risks that we are seeing and be able to actually refine our supervisory approaches to ultimately ensure that our sports betting reporting mechanism remains effective and reaches the objectives that it sets out to reach.
Yeah, thank you, Marta. I've actually read the report on Maltese football, and I found it to be very interesting. I think one of the components which I found very interesting in that report, which to be fair didn't come to a surprise, is the fact that you were talking about the Maltese football, the attention that the tournament gets from bettors abroad. And I think that's a common symptom to any other sport. In fact, we at IBA, we find, and we're quite public about this, that usually the fixers fixing the event are actually outside the location from where the event is taking place. So, and I think for the audience, it's very important to know that transnational aspect. However, I also like the fact that both you and Dieter spoke a lot about having MOUs in place, having data sharing agreements in place, and this is important. And I also appreciate the fact how you attach the notion of compliance. Because sometimes, and we find this at IBA as well, in order to have effective collaboration, you need to have effective compliance. And ensuring that at least in our case, the members in our association are actually reporting. So in our case, we do actually monitor who is reporting and by how much in terms of percent. And if they are lesser than a specific threshold, we do speak to them. And like MJ does, we do try and understand why that is happening. So that is very, very important. And speaking on the notion of collaboration, I'm going back to you, Dieter, now. Because we do speak about how important collaboration is, and I think I've said it at least 5 times throughout the past 1.5 hours, but it does have its challenges. It does have its challenges. So what I want to ask to you, Dieter, is what are the biggest challenges that you find in fostering real-time cooperation? This is important because sometimes that cooperation needs to be real-time between international sports bodies and the national regulators when investigating betting-related corruption.
Okay, so yeah, so basically I've been in this role for a year, and I've been able to, follow up on various alerts that come through regulators or other sports or operators. And specifically when it comes to regulators, let's say a classical case like you also had in the masterclass. So we would receive an IBIA alert, which has been vetted by you, confirmed with also a number of other operators. And in there, you specify who's the compliance contact for us to then reach out on the basis of a data sharing agreement which is already signed or which we propose to the operator to sign. Now what we see in practice is, if we speak about a big international group, with which even when we have a data sharing agreement in place, depending on the jurisdiction where the bet took place, the operator can either share with us, or what we see in a number of countries, due to the national legislation and to the regulatory office in place, the operator can only share that information with the regulator. So, and this is an issue which I think we should really be engaging with as sports, with the regulators to overcome. This is not just to solve like an easy critique from my side. I know they're bound by laws. There's a legal review around any data sharing. But it's true that for sports, it's sometimes very frustrating because we know we have a data sharing agreement in place. They have relevant information for us to share. But because of legal constraints, it's stuck with the regulator. And we have a couple of regulators we're now in discussion with. So this notion of sharing, and I think it's, when you look at then the national match fixing law or gaming law in a country, it's often very well thought through. But often, as you say, it doesn't cover the fact that also as sports, and I think ITIA is an excellent example. I mean, Sarah told me they have 12 investigators, a number of analysts, they put out sanctions so often. So there's a couple of sports really doing good work, important work. Sanctions can go out very quickly, very effectively towards players. So I think we have, we can claim a number of best practice, with which we can go to regulators and saying, and to countries, to legislators, say, look, also make sure that your legal framework allows account level information to be shared with the sports, either at the national level, but also at the international level. Because some countries, they do have it, but then it can be shared nationally and not internationally. So, but this is ongoing. I think I've been in this industry for over 10 years. So there's definitely a lot of cases now where we're going in the right direction for sure. But this is one aspect I found out now over the last year. And then secondly, and this is maybe, but still I think it is, it's the aspect of betting on your own sport or on a multi-sport event you're part of. So you may say, yeah, okay, it's not match fixing, but of course what we try to avoid and what we really don't want is a culture of gambling, betting, inside information through WhatsApp groups by athletes participating in the high-level events. So for us, we see this as a challenge, and we need to really focus on that and really work on the betting on sport provision. And what we see that is in many countries, there's very strong match-fixing laws, but the aspect of betting on the sport is not fully covered and creates a lot of questions. But for us, this provision is very clear. I think this is where sports has a mandate also, and where they should be able to act, not necessarily police. So I think that's an area. And I was also now discussing with the Italian regulator. They've updated a number of provisions in view of Milano Cortina to address this partially, but it's still ongoing. So the betting on sport is something, there's still progress, I think, to be made on that as well.
Yeah, no, I think that last point is very important. I mean, even us at IBA, in our education campaigns, we focus on the 3 R's, we call them. And the first R actually represents know your rules, know the rules. And obviously, it all starts from there, I believe, from athletes betting on their own sport. And athletes should know the rules, because even in my experience in the sports betting integrity field, sometimes I did see athletes betting on their own sport without actually knowing that it goes against their rules. So they were doing it naturally and with no intent to fix the event, etc. But that is a risk, a big risk to the athlete himself, but also a risk to obviously the sports betting integrity ecosystem as a whole. And I saw how you explained the fact that sometimes to have effective collaboration, you need to dance a little bit around the agreements, making sure that you are in line, making sure that can I give this data, can I not give this data? And I think these are issues which...
If I just may complete on this, it just came to mind again. I had noted it down but forgotten. So we have seen cases that we send a request to an operator in a country, shares with the regulator, and it was about an athlete betting on the sport. So from a sanctioning perspective, it's quite easy to push it through and issue, again, a sanction which can act as a deterrent. But in that country, again, national legislation, we cannot share with a private foreign entity. So we also have partnerships with the Swiss Federal Police, with Interpol, Europol. So we had to get the information through Interpol about an athlete betting on the sport. So we try to work around it, but it's obviously not the most direct of ways to get to the international to get to the information.
Yeah, and that's something which is essential, because I've been in the space for more than 10 years now, and I remember a time where entities would not give you the data, and the excuse was always GDPR, GDPR, GDPR. And I do believe that all industries have come a long way now. At least I see it much less now. At least I'm seeing agreements being amended in a way that would allow and facilitate more information sharing. And it was interesting to obviously look at the discussion from a sports perspective. So now I want to come to you, Marta, and explore this from a regulator's perspective. And I want to ask you, so how does Malta collaborate with both operators and integrity bodies to identify and address suspicious betting activity?
So on this notion, it's actually quite a topic that we discuss internally, given that sports betting integrity is one of the areas that actually is not entirely seen as a cost of compliance. So anything that relates to sports betting, ultimately there is skin in the game for the operators to actually comply. Yeah. So there's a little bit more of an incentive. So that definitely helps in actually achieving more proactive collaboration, given that it's an area that, unless obviously they are colluding with bad actors, which definitely that would need a further investigation in its own right, there is definitely an incentive to actually collaborate and report suspicious betting activity. We do see, even through the guidance that happened in the past years, that operators generally cooperate well. The framework itself, how it is set up, helps. Given that there's an there's a portal, and the operators can submit suspicious betting integrity through there. It's quite easy. The alerting mechanism, we tried as much as possible to improve efficiency around it, because we had received feedback that it's sometimes a lot for them to be able to sift through. So as much as possible, we tried to, probably you experienced it while you were still at the MGA, but as much as possible, we tried to apply a risk-based approach to the activities that we analyze and send out alerts to our operators on, and that definitely helps. Because ultimately, we want to make it as easy for operators to comply as possible. Obviously, then, when suspicious activities are received, the team analyzes those activities. There's a lot of open source intelligence that is analyzed too, before we pass on the information to the relevant sports governing bodies and enforcement agencies, depending on the nature that we see. We have a very good relationship with the different bodies, and that helps. So nurturing the relationships definitely help in building more synergies and speed to address issues. Locally, I mean, with the Malta Police Force, we have built a very strong relationship too. So that helps, obviously, when we're looking at the local scene. But obviously, we know that this is a cross-border issue, and so our relationships with peers, such as the panel members joining me here, is paramount and definitely important for the system to operate. Ultimately, to deal with cross-border issues, we need to deal with cross-border bodies, associations, and agencies.
Yeah, no, you mentioned a good point. Look, we throw the word collaboration around quite often, but it's not always easy. And that is why governing bodies need to facilitate the process of reporting as much as possible. So I appreciate what MJ is doing and always trying to enhance the reporting platform, etc. And it's something which we've done ourselves at IBA. Just at the end of last year, we've upgraded our reporting system, especially from a technology point of view. And look, the technology is out there, and we as the people on the good side of the fight should be making use of this to try and facilitate that collaboration, because definitely the match fixers are using that technology to be able to facilitate their own agendas. I'm shifting the tone slightly now, because this is something which we didn't tackle much also in the masterclass, and this is the topic of education. Because I think we've spoken about all the different components which are very important on the monitoring and detection aspect. But education plays a very, very important key. And I come to you now again, Sarah, on this topic, because there is a bit of a fine line between athlete awareness, knowing the rules, etc., and disciplinary action. So my question to you is, how does ITIA approach this fine line between athlete awareness and disciplinary action?
Thank you. Education for us is absolutely crucial to everything that we do. And prevention is also key. So we start with juniors, actually, who are not under our tennis anti-corruption program yet, because they are juniors. But we have a strategy that we go out, and every opportunity will go to tournaments where they're competing to educate, to let them know that these rules exist, where to find them. They're online, they're on our website. So starting early to almost ingrain them that that's actually really normal to have rules, but be aware, know your rules. They'll know the rules in relation to the match, the game, but they won't always know of the detail that exists in relation to the finer details of the program. So that's where we start. That's our start point in relation to juniors. We also have, for all players, any level, so ATP, WTA, or the World Tennis Tour, ITF level, they will all do a 2-year, every 2 years there is an online training program. They have to complete that every 2 years. And that has what we would describe as relevant questions that we may have learned from in the last 2 years. Yeah. So if there's something relevant or something timely, that is, we can refresh and make sure that that learning is getting and reaching out to players, because we need to do that, and that is something that we do. We also have extended that now to support personnel as well. It's not just only players, so it would include coaches, for example, and other support personnel. And also, if we're key tournament staff as well, have that access to that training, because again, a coach really needs to know the rules in relation to the anti-corruption program, not just about what happens on court, because they are a mentor. They are seeing what's happening, so they are also our eyes and ears, and they can offer that guidance. So that's absolutely key. So what we also do, personal responsibility on ourselves, is to identify if we have found, which we did a couple of years ago, vulnerability around chair umpires. And we had an investigation, quite a large one, involving chair umpires cheating and manipulating scores, which didn't involve the players. It was totally the chair umpires. So now, learning from that, we are now educating, and we're going to every chair umpire school globally each year. We're sending at least one member of our team, if not two, to educate, to share that knowledge, to make sure that chair umpires know the rules, know where to find them. Again, it's just learning from experience as well. So we're continually doing that. And then the other area of business, it's a new thing. It's only just, I want to say within the last month, we have something called The Line. And this is a confidential line where people via WhatsApp, players and staff, can contact us, not only to report in confidence, as I won't get the word out, anonymously, they can report to us information that is timely, which will help us, again, with the education and our investigations, but also with that, they can ask advice and questions of us, so they can do that. Again, it's a timely way. If they have a concern about maybe a corrupt approach or something they've heard, they can report it to us. So we're trying to make everything as easy for the players to contact us, but also for us to reach out. And I know as an investigator myself, if I'm interviewing a player, if I can see from when they did their training, they may have got a question wrong, I will educate them in that moment to make sure they have that understanding. So we treat every opportunity. And then the other thing that we do, when we do go to tournaments, we wear T-shirts that have our logo on it. Okay. And we're reaching out to players face to face to allow them the opportunity, if they want to approach us, and also to be seen at tournaments so we can deal with things. And that in itself is prevention. Yeah. Being at a tournament, players may have arranged a fix, but actually the ITIA are here, I am not fixing that match today. So again, that is part of our prevention scheme, and it's part of our mission statement to prevention is where we're at. And we're finding it's working.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. And I like the fact, I believe it was the first point which you mentioned, how you prioritize education and you start off with targeting the juniors, you said, right? Yes. And I think that's essential. And I want to tie that in with actually 2 slides which you presented in the masterclass, where you actually showed the nice big stadium filled with a huge audience, and then the abandoned tennis court, etc. And I think for the audience here, it's important to highlight the difference, because obviously most alerts, most match fixing incidents take place in the second image and not in the first image. And potentially there's the perception that it all happens in the top tier events, because obviously that is what the media tends to showcase the most. but yeah, that's not the reality. So I appreciate the fact that, and even us as IBA, we do support that you need to focus a lot on the young persons, on the lower tier events, and even from our end, when we do education, we try and do them in the locker rooms.
Yes.
We do have an education ambassador who is an ex-athlete himself, who's an ex-basketball player, so he knows what these athletes have gone through, both if they have already been approached or if they potentially will be in the future. But we also found that to be very useful, to actually do it in the dressing room. But yeah, Dieter, I was going to ask you this question, but I'm looking at the timer and it's going down really quickly. But I think because of this question being linked to education, I think it links nicely to Sarah's question. And yeah, so it's a very similar question, actually. How do you see the balance between athlete education and investigative enforcement evolving under the Olympic movement?
Yeah, thanks, Anton. I think a lot of it, I mean, we're from a lot of our initiatives on the similar line as ITIA, as what Sarah outlined. So just in general, what we do as a unit, first of all, is rules and regulations. We need to make sure that all our IFs, they have rules in place, and we do compliance. But then most of our efforts, most of the people we have, work on education, and also on education. So it means we go out to multi-sports events. So we have a booth, we talk in person, there's online education. We now also have an ambassadors program. So some of them are IOC members, some of former Olympians, so that we basically can cover all major regions in the world. And they are now in training with us, and they're the ones who go out to the athletes and speak to them closer to home, in line with their culture, you know, with much more finesse compared to sometimes when coming from Europe or Switzerland, and speaking to the local athletes. And also for us, it's a lot about listening to them, and also not saying that I'm a former Interpol official, because I want to say we don't want to scare them off, but we want to say to them is, look, we're here to protect with you the integrity of the sport, and for that you need to do the right thing, but you also have an obligation to report, and it's based on those reports that we can help you to protect the integrity, to protect fair competitions. And because, as you also outlined in your first slide, our mandate is not only related to sports betting. When my colleagues speak to those athletes at the booth, there's always stories coming up about non-selection, questions around judging, governance, and of course there's only a sentiment or an allegation, everything needs to be investigated, but by speaking to the athlete, there's a lot of information that comes up, there's all sorts of pressures going on, there's harassment, online betting harassment, we hear stories about that, so it's really also a way to capture what is living with the athlete and to address it, and then an invitation for them to have trust in us, like we have to build trust amongst our institutions to effectively collaborate. There's a lot of work for us, to be honest, and also building that trust with the athletes. And then, of course, when the scandal breaks, we all know here that it's basically an economic reality, that some matches, there's a temptation to fix. But we see is, of course, whenever there's a sanction, it's still an important deterrent that we can use in the athlete education, like, look, this is, you know, we're not speaking about something abstract or organized crime, but this is what's happened, these are the people involved at that level in the sports. So the education impacts the enforcement, and also the enforcement is a strong deterrent when my colleagues go out and do education.
Yeah. Thank you, Dieter. Yeah, as expected, we will not manage all the questions, which we were close. We were very close when considering everything. But yeah. But I want to thank you, all three of you, for a very insightful panel. I want to thank again IAGA the International Association for Gaming Advisors for hosting this panel and giving us this, this opportunity. And yeah, with the masterclass, the focus was very much on the relationship between sports betting industry and the sports sector. Obviously, we've widened the discussion a little bit more here, and I do hope that everyone found that insightful and as enjoyable as we found it. So yeah, thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.